The Tibetan Mastiff is an ancient breed and type of domestic dog originating with nomadic cultures of Tibet, China, Nepal, India, and Central Asia. Names and etymology. The Tibetan Mastiff, also known as khyi, reflects its use as a guardian of herds, flocks, tents, villages, monasteries, and palaces, much as the Old English brown dog was a dog tied outside the home as a guardian. However, in nomad camps and in villages, the khyi is traditionally allowed to run loose at night. The guardian type from which the modern Tibetan Mastiff breed has been derived was known across the ancient world by many names. Boat kicker in Nepali as boat means someone from Tibet and kicker means dog. The Chinese name for the breed is C, meaning Tibetan Mastiff dog. In Mongolia, it is called Bangka. The name Tibetan Mastiff is a misnomer. It is not a true Mastiff. The term Mastiff was used primarily because it meant big dog. Early Western visitors to Tibet misnamed several of its breeds. The Tibetan Terrier is not a terrier and the Tibetan Spaniel is not a spaniel. A better name for the dog would be Tibetan Mountain Dog or, to encompass the landrace breed throughout its range, Himalayan Mountain Dog. Description, appearance. Some breeders differentiate between two types of Tibetan Mastiff, the khyi and the tḥòcḥi. The tḥòcḥi is also referred to as the monastery type, described as generally taller, heavier, and more heavily boned, with more facial wrinkling and haw than the khyi or nomad type. Both types are often produced in the same litter, with the larger, heavier pups being more rare. Males can reach heights up to 83 cm. Dogs bred in the West weigh between 45 to 68 kg, although dogs in the upper range are often overweight. The enormous dogs being produced in some Western and some Chinese kennels would have cost too much to keep fed to have been useful to nomads. And their questionable structure would have made them less useful as livestock or property guardians. The Tibetan Mastiff is considered a primitive breed. It typically retains the hardiness which would be required for it to survive in Tibet and the high-altitude Himalayan range, including the northern part of Nepal, India and Bhutan. Instinctive behaviors including canine pack behavior contributed to the survival of the breed in harsh environments. It is one of the few primitive dog breeds that retains a single estrus per year instead of two, even at much lower altitudes and in much more temperate climates than its native climate. This characteristic is also found in wild canids such as the wolf. Since its estrus usually takes place during late fall, most Tibetan Mastiff puppies are born between December and January. Its double coat is long, subject to climate, and found in a wide variety of colors, including solid black, black and tan, various shades of red, and bluish-gray, often with white markings. Some breeders are now marketing white Tibetan Mastiffs. These dogs are actually very pale gold, not truly white. Photoshop is often used to make dogs of normal color, appear white in advertisements. The coat of a Tibetan Mastiff lacks the unpleasant big dog smell that affects many large breeds. The coat, whatever its length or color, should shed dirt and odors. Although the dogs shed somewhat throughout the year, there is generally one great molt in late winter or early spring and sometimes another, lesser molt in the late summer or early fall. Tibetan Mastiffs are shown under one standard in the West, but separated by the Indian breed standard into two varieties, lion head and tiger head. Temperament. As a flock guardian dog in Tibet and in the West, it is capable of confronting predators the size of wolves and leopards, although it uses all the usual livestock guardian tactics to warn them away and avoid direct confrontations. As a socialized, more domestic dog, it can thrive in a spacious, fenced yard with a canine companion, but it is generally not an appropriate dog for apartment living. The Western-bred dogs are generally more easygoing, although somewhat aloof with strangers coming to the home. Through hundreds of years of selective breeding for a protective flock and family guardian, the breed has been prized for being a nocturnal sentry, keeping would-be predators and intruders at bay, barking at sounds throughout the night. Leaving a Tibetan Mastiff outside all night with neighbors nearby is not recommended. They often sleep during the day to be more active, alert and aware at night. Like all flock guardian breeds, they are intelligent and stubborn to a fault, so obedience training is recommended since this is a strong-willed, powerful breed. Unless they are to be used exclusively as livestock guardians, socialization is also critical with this breed because of their reserved nature with strangers and guardian instincts. They are excellent family dogs for the right family. Owners must understand canine psychology and be willing and able to assume the primary leadership position. Lack of consistent, rational discipline can result in the creation of dangerous, unpredictable dogs. The protectiveness of Tibetan Mastiffs requires alertness and planning by the owner in order to avoid mishaps when the dog is simply performing as a guardian. The breed is not recommended for novice dog owners. Health. Unlike most large breeds, its life expectancy is long, some 10–14 years at least in some lines. Other, more closely inbred lines, produce short-lived, unhealthy dogs. The breed has fewer genetic health problems than many breeds, but cases can be found of hyperthyroidism, entropion, ectropion, distichiasis, skin problems including allergies, autoimmune problems including demodex, Addison's disease, Cushing's disease, missing teeth, malocclusion, cardiac problems, seizures, epilepsy, progressive retinal atrophy, cataract, and small ear canals with a tendency for infection. As with most large breeds, some will suffer with elbow or hip dysplasia. Canine inherited demyelinative neuropathy, an inherited condition, appeared in one of the prominent lines of Tibetan Mastiffs in the early 1980s. Unfortunately, known carriers were bred extensively and are behind many lines still being actively bred. Because the mode of inheritance appears to be as a simple recessive, continued inbreeding can still produce affected puppies. Hyperthyroidism is fairly common in Tibetan Mastiffs, as it is in many large northern breeds. They should be tested periodically throughout their lives using a complete thyroid panel. However, because the standard thyroid levels were established using domestic dog breeds, test results must be considered in the context of what is normal for the breed, not what is normal across all breeds. Many dogs of this breed will have low thyroid values but no clinical symptoms. Vets and owners differ on the relative merits of medicating dogs which test low, but are completely asymptomatic. Some researchers think that asymptomatic hyperthyroidism may have been adaptive in the regions of origin for many breeds, since less nutrition is required for the dog to stay in good condition. Therefore, attempts to eliminate low thyroid dogs from the Tibetan Mastiff gene pool may have unintended consequences for the breed. History. This is an ancient breed. It has been theorized that an early Tibetan dog is the ancestor to all Molossus breeds, although this is disputed by most experts. A highly questionable study at Nanjing Agricultural University's Laboratory of Animal Reproductive Genetics and Molecular Evolution in Nanjing, China, found that while most common dog breeds genetically diverged from the wolf approximately 42,000 years ago, the Tibetan Mastiff genetically diverged from the wolf approximately 58,000 years ago. In the early 19th century, King George IV owned a pair of Tibetan Mastiffs, and enough of the breed were available in England in 1906 to be shown at the 1906 Crystal Palace show. However, during the war years, the breed lost favour and focus and nearly died out in England. After 1980, the breed began to gain in popularity worldwide. Although the breed is still considered somewhat uncommon, as more active breeders arose and produced adequate numbers of dogs, various registries and show organizations began to recognize the breed. Since AKC recognition, the number of active breeders has skyrocketed, leading to overproduction of puppies, many of which are highly inbred and of questionable quality. Initially, the breed suffered because of the limited gene pool from the original stock, but today's reputable breeders work hard at reducing the genetic problems through selective breeding and the international exchange of new bloodlines. However, some few breeders cling to the practice of inbreeding, do not perform health tests on their breeding stock, and do not support buyers of the puppies they produce. Many puppies and adult dogs end up in shelters and in rescue situations. In 2008, the Tibetan Mastiff competed for the first time in the Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show. a Chinese woman was reported to have spent more than 4 million yuan to buy an 18-month-old purebred male Tibetan Mastiff, which he named Yangtze No. 2. In March 2011, a red Tibetan Mastiff was reported to have been sold to a coal baron from northern China for 10 million yuan. There have been other similar reports of dogs sold for astronomical prices. However, most of these appear to be breeders' attempts to drive up the prices of their dogs. Photos of dogs shown on websites are frequently photoshopped to exaggerate color intensity, size, and bone. Buyers have reported getting their dogs home only to find that bathing removes both color and hair extensions from the coat. Gallery. Popular culture. A Tibetan Mastiff named Max is the central character in the 1993 horror film, Man's Best Friend. At least 5 different dogs were used in filming. A Tibetan Mastiff also shows up in books by the popular Western novelist, Louis Lama and Treasure Mountain. A Tibetan Mastiff is the subject of the 2011 animated film The Tibetan Dog. In 2013, a Chinese zoo was involved in a scandal surrounding a Tibetan Mastiff masquerading as a lion. See also, Dog of Osu, Tibetan Terrier, Index of Tibet-related articles, references. Alderton, David. The Dog. London, MacDonald. ISBN 0356104435. Fogel, Bruce, DVM. The New Encyclopedia of the Dog. Doring Kindersley. ISBN 0-7894-6130-7. Tibetan Mastiff, Big Splash, becomes world's most expensive dog. The Huffington Post. March 16, 2011. Updated May 25, 2011. Retrieved December 6, 2012. Quang Ni, a khyi registered trademark CSHE, C. Beijing, Guo Jiwenhui Chu Ban Gong C. ISBN 7-80173-535-8. OCLCA 229909428. Messerschmitt, Don. Big Dogs of Tibet and the Himalayas. Orchid Press ISBN 978-974-524-130-5. Palmer, Joan. The Illustrated Encyclopedia of Dog Breeds. ISBN 0-7858-0030-1. Schuller, Elizabeth Merowita. Simon and Schuster's Guide to Dogs. ISBN 0-671-25527-4. World's most expensive dog costs £1 million. Sci-Fi News. Ian's. March 16, 2011. Retrieved December 6, 2012. External links. Tibetan Mastiff at DMOZ. Tibetan Mastiff craze sweeps China Euro slideshow by The Huffington Post.